Hello, Old School Comics here. We have a random comic book review. This time it is going to be Ms. Marvel, number one from 1977. 30 cents, January. Right here in the cover, on the character box next to Carol Danvers' face, it says, "This female fights back." All right. Ms. Marvel's actually kind of a interesting character in so much as that she's one of these characters that came out, pretty much around this time period that Marvel introduced, where the characters came about because they had a name they wanted to use, and then they came up with a character, as opposed to someone pitching a story or pitching a character and then figuring out what to call it or whatever. So she's similar to like She-Hulk and Spider Woman, where they were like, yeah, we better use this name first before somebody else does. um it's actually kind of touched upon a little bit in the letters page that was written by Gary Conway, who's the writer of this particular issue, where he says right here, "But why the name Ms. Marvel? I believe it was Roy Thomas who suggested the name when Stan suggested the book, but that was before my arrival, my re-arrival at Marvel, and I'm not sure. Other writers were scheduled to do the book at one time or another, but eventually it came to me, and I've since developed my own ideas, uninfluenced by whatever thinking may have gone before." Um, Now, of course, Ms. Marvel's original look and her powers are kind of spun off from Captain Marvel, who had his own comic at this particular time, and that's kind of touched on here a little bit. But though it's not a completely spelled out at first, even though it's pretty obvious to everybody else who's everybody involved, including the reader. But let's kind of jump into it here. Um, so it's Ms. Marvel. Stan Lee presents Ms. Marvel, conceived, written, and edited by Gary Conway. And then there's a little asterisk here. You look down at the bottom of the page where the footnote is, and it says, "With more than a little aid and abetment from Carla Conway, art and storytelling by John Buscema, care and embellishment by Joe Sennett, John Costanza letters, Marie Severin colors." And the title is "This Woman, This Warrior." And the opening caption is, "She flies. Like the Valkyrie guards of Valhalla, she swoops across the face of the earth, arms as widespread as an eagle's wings, eyes burning, jaws set, her every sinew throbbing with battle anticipation. Her name is her own, but for want of something better, we may call her Marvel. Ms. Marvel." And the drawing is she's kind of swooping down from the sky. She's coming on this scene where these thugs are like robbing this bank, and they're running out with the money, and they're shooting people and stuff like that. And she jumps in. There's a big fight, and there's a kind of funny bit here where one of the thugs is like, uh, "Holy henna! I don't believe it! Did you see that broad? Did you see what she did? Frankie and Phil, both of them knocked out with one punch." And then the other thug is like, "This New York, you bozo. Ain't you never seen a superhero before?" And then, she basically smashes their car, and she beats up everybody here. And there's a scene where they show her using her seventh sense, which is this kind of psychic ability to do psychic things of some sort that just makes her aware of things. It's really not something I think they really use these days too much in the modern comics, but we'll leave that alone for a while. Anyway, while Carol is having a fight with these thugs outside, inside, slipping into the bank, unnoticed by everyone, is the Scorpion, who comes in and grabs the money that the thugs didn't get, and he basically gets away and runs off. We next cut to the scene at the Daily Bugle, where J. Jonah Jameson is interviewing Carol Danvers, and they're watching footage of Ms. Marvel, fighting these thugs or whatever. And basically, Carol says, "Let me get this straight, Mr. Jameson. You want me to hire me as an editor for a new magazine called Woman? And you want my first issue to be an expose of her?" And J. Jonah Jameson is like, "Yeah, we're publishing this magazine, but you know what? I hate superheroes, so I want your first story to be, get the goods on this Ms. Marvel person, and so on and so forth. Now, while she's leaving the office, she, by coincidence, runs into Peter Parker and Mary Jane. Pete kind of has like just only a 2-panel cameo here. He literally only says hello and then walks off. But Mary Jane and Carol Danvers get to talking, and they seem to be getting kind of friendly with each other. Then we cut back to the Scorpion, who's in Brooklyn. He comes into this brownstone, but of course, it's booby trapped because it's actually the secret lair, the secret lab of this kind of corrupt mad scientist guy. And basically we find out the whole thing was staged, so the whole bank robbery, I should say, was staged so that Scorpion can get the money to buy this place from the mad scientist, because he's got some nefarious deeds he wants to do. And it's kind of funny here where Gorgon is like Matt Gorgon, who is a Scorpion, is kind of ranting and raving about, oh yeah, I'm only going to use this place once, but once is all I need. And he's going on, he's monologuing. And the scientist is kind of like looking at him sideways or whatever. And then we have a close-up on him, and then the captions are all Professor Kerwin Corbin lifts an eyebrow in silent amusement, but if he has an opinion about the man called Scorpion, he does not voice it. No, Professor Kerwin Corbin says nothing at all. Take a long look, reader. We've got a feeling we may see this man again. Dun dun dun. Anyway, we cut back to MJ and Carol Danvers, and they're having conversations. She's basically telling everything that's happened to her since she was last seen in the Captain Marvel comic, how she could no longer be head of security at NASA, so she had to find a new career as a writer, and that's why she's in New York, and that's why she's working for J. Jonah Jameson, and so on and so forth. And the conversation is going pretty smoothly between MJ and Carol until Carol has a fainting spell, and basically she goes to her bedroom and just kind of passes out or whatever. MJ goes home, of course, and that's it. Now, keep in mind, at this point, at no point have we seen is the connection. Let's see here. How do I want to say this? Basically, we either see Ms. Marvel doing something, or we see Carol Danvers doing something. At no point does one person or one identity change into the other so far. So next, we see Matt Gorgon capture J. Jonah Jameson. Then the next scene, all of a sudden, like I said, last thing we saw was Carol Danvers passed out in her bed. Next, we see Ms. Marvel someplace else, flying through the air, going to the Daily Bugle. She's like, my seventh sense warned me too late that Jameson was going to be kidnapped, but perhaps there's still time to save him. So it says, that must be the Daily Bugle building up ahead. If my intuition's correct, I should pick up the necessary vibrations there. And then she goes on, she's still thinking, and she's wondering why this place seems so familiar when she's never been there before, and blah, 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 blah. She runs into Robbie Robinson, and he's like, yeah, what can I do for you, Ms.? And she's like, you want my name? He's like, yeah, you have one. She's like, yeah, I don't think I have, And basically, she figures out, she gets a psychic reading and figures out where the Scorpion has taken J. Jonah Jameson, and she flies off again, and then we see her flying across the cityscape, and then they point out again in the captions where it says, passing one particular window belonging to a woman named Carol Danvers, whose apartment is shadowed and empty. And there's an inside shot of Carol's apartment, So, Anyway, back to the secret hideout. Gorgon's got J. Jonah Jameson tied up in this contraption. He's going to lower him down into this vat of acid. And he basically explains he's kidnapped him because he basically just hates him. And you get like a little 2 panel recap of the Scorpion's origin, where he basically explains, you know what, you hired me to track down Peter Parker some years ago. Then you hired me to take part in this experiment so I could fight Spider-Man. But now I'm trapped. I'm a freak. I can never be normal again, and I blame you. So that's why he's trying to kill J. Jonah Jameson. Next, we go to the outside of the hideout. Here comes Ms. Marvel, and she says, I'll need all my concentration, all my Kree-born skill. Kree-born? But I'm an Earth woman. Why did I think? But then, of course, she has to fight the lasers and the trapdoors and everything, and then she finds the room where Scorpion and J. Jonah are, and there's a big fight and so on and so forth, and they're throwing machinery at each other and they're hitting each other and this, that, and the other thing, just a good old-fashioned Mighty Marvel slugfest. And in the midst of all this, she basically states out loud that her powers come from the Kree, but she doesn't know how. She really doesn't know her name and how she's got amnesia and whatnot. And and that's that. You know what I mean? She beats up Scorpion, saves J. Jonah Jameson, and the end of the comic is on the last page. We're back at the office, and it says J. Jonah James is basically ranting and raving. He's like, I want an expose of that Marvel, Damon. I want it started now. Nobody can make a fool out of J. Jonah Jameson, especially not a woman. And at the bottom of the page, we have we have Carol Danvers in her office just thinking to herself, funny, isn't it? Jameson's giving me a mystery to solve, plus I have one of my own. Which is the greater enigma, the woman named Carol Danvers or the warrior we call Ms. Marvel? And of course the gag being that Carol's been having these blackout spells and she doesn't know what goes on during these blackout spells. So basically she doesn't know that she and Ms. Marvel are the same person. At the end of at the very bottom of the page, it says, next issue, the secret origin of Ms. Marvel. And I won't kind of go into that. Even though, well, yeah, I won't go into that. We're just going to stick to issue 1. But it is explained in the second issue, and the third issue, kind of wraps everything up in a pretty succinct way. I think one thing that was pretty interesting, well, there's actually a couple things that are interesting here. In the letters page, Gary Conway, pretty much addresses some issues. Addresses a lot of issues that still come up today a bit. Stuff about there aren't that many female superheroes starting their own comics. Hey, why is it that we've got a guy writing this comic about a female hero and so on and so forth? And, he makes a pretty good, case about, why he thinks, those things are. One thing I think is pretty interesting, though, because he tries to make the case like, she's her own woman. But, there's the obvious thing where she starts out as a character whose look and powers are spun off of, or from, another male character. And then, her whole supporting cast and things are like, taken from another character, which is actually pretty funny because it looks like even though the character is a spinoff of Captain Marvel, they're trying to sell it on a loose connection to Spider-Man. Right here on the cover, it's like, at last, a bold new heroine, super heroine, in a sense-stunning tradition of Spider-Man. And right here on the cover, you get pictures of Mary Jane and Peter and J. Jonah Jameson. And the first villain is a Spider-Man villain, But actually not extremely long afterwards, they did kind of make Carol Danvers a little bit more a bit more individualistic, and he kind of moved away from the Captain Marvel thing as well as the Spider-Man thing and so on and so forth. The character's been through a ton of changes over the years, but I really didn't want to get into that. I just kind of wanted to talk about this particular issue, and it is very interesting that since they brought her back over the last several years that she does have a pretty substantial fan base. Her comics were never like the number one sellers, but there are a lot of people that like the character. And I don't know, I guess that's it. I got to thank you very much. Leave whatever comments you want to leave. Thanks, and you have a great day.